Hello, I'm Jimmy Glenos, your life and leadership locksmith, and I'm here to help you get out of a jam, a rut, a stuck place, or anywhere you think you need a little nudge, some guidance, or even a full-blown action plan. If you're ready to break out and break through to a brand new you, let me help you find the keys. Let's not wait any longer. It's time to unlock the shortcut. Hello, I'm Jimmy Glenos, the Life and Leadership Locksmith, and welcome to Unlock the Shortcut. Today we take a break from our usual format because I recently had the opportunity to talk with one of the top thinkers and leaders in emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and change leadership. His name is Joshua Freedman. Josh is the author of 6 books, including the bestselling At the Heart of Leadership, and he is the CEO and co-founder of 6Seconds Emotional Intelligence Network. In his work at 6Seconds, Joshua leads the world's most extensive EQ organization with offices and representatives in 25 countries and continues to lead programs in over 50 countries. He works with leaders and teams around the world, helping them use emotional intelligence to get better results. His clients include FedEx, Microsoft, Intel, Amazon, all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, and the United Nations. In our conversation today, we discuss the meaning of 6 seconds, the significance of 1 billion, and even the relevance of retired NFL players. As you're about to find out, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you do too. And now, my conversation with Joshua Freedman. Hello, Joshua Freedman. It's so good to see you today. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm glad to be with you.
Awesome. So Josh and I just met. We met through a mutual friend. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, how you got to this place, and what 6 seconds is all about?
That song, It's a Long and Winding Road, is coming to mind. So in 1992, I started teaching in a school where they had a commitment to emotional development. And the notion was that emotional development and academic development actually could go together and help each other. And I was intrigued by that, but kind of alarmed, like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with emotions. I just want to talk about history. But that was the year that Daniel Goleman came and visited the school. And then he ended up writing about our methodology, self-science, as one of 2 models he had found in the world of how you actually develop and use emotional intelligence. And we started to get lots of inquiries at the school of how do you actually do this? Like, yes, I read Goleman's book, it's amazing, but practically, how do I actually use emotions in an intelligent way? And in 1997, we decided to start an organization to answer that question. And we thought we'd be primarily working in K-12 education, but we started getting people from all over the world and all kinds of different sectors contacting us. And a bunch of people wrote and said, well, I want to get certified. And I really didn't know what that meant. And I went to the president, Annabelle Jensen, of our organization and said, Annabelle, what do you think this means? And she said, oh, I don't know. I guess they just want some in-depth training. So we decided to put together what we called an emotional intelligence practitioner certification. It was the first one in the world. And there had been other certifications around emotional intelligence tools that were out, but nobody was teaching people how do you actually use emotional intelligence. And in our first certification, we had people from 6 different countries. We had people from big business and small business and army and a union and a university. And it was fascinating. And one of the things that all these people said was, I felt really alone doing this work. Like, I know emotional intelligence is important. I get it. But people in my company, people in my school, people in my country, people in my agency, they don't really get it. And of course, this is before coaching existed. This is before, before the internet barely existed in 1997. And so we started to share, how do you really do this? And that led us to, at this point, work in 200 countries and territories. We have certified practitioners in 150 countries. We have people all over the world using these tools and methods to grow the world's emotional intelligence. And that's what our work is about.
Wow. So you're just a startup, right? Small little company, it sounds like.
Just a startup. It feels like a startup. Perpetual 25 years of startup.
25 years of startup, exactly, across the globe, reaching
we are up to over 9 million people that we have reached through our network. All of the coaches and consultants and trainers and facilitators and educators in our network who are out there working with people. So 9 million and counting.
it's a do you have it up like like the golden arches and you say how many burgers?
We used to have it on our homepage, actually.
For sure. I know. I remember seeing it when I looked at the homepage. Well, you have another number out there, though. Tell me what the significance of 1 billion is.
So I mentioned Annabelle, our president, and at a meeting in 2012, she said, I want 1 billion people to come to my birthday when I turn 100 and celebrate emotional intelligence. And we were kind of joking about that and like, well, how would we do it? And that it just became one of those ideas that became really resonant for us as we kept saying, well, if we really were going to have 1 billion people, what would it take? And it led us to completely change our strategy. We shut down all of our for-profit consulting offices around the world that we had at that time and really started to focus on how do we grow this network. And our vision is 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence. And what that means is we see that the way to create this kind of change in the world where people can be more connected with themselves and each other, we need lots and lots and lots of people doing that work. And we need people equipped to be able to do that. And if we're really going to have 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence, it has to become that the practice part has to become something that's accessible and easy to do really anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, the practice, because we've all read books, right? And they sit on the shelf and we're like, oh, I'm so smart. I know this now. And until I put it to practice, does it really make a difference in my life or in the world? Not really, because some of us call it shelf help. So, because that's where it goes and it stays there.
It's one of the things I love about coaching, by the way. One of my books is about change and how organizations change. And one of the pieces that I found in my research was the biggest obstacle is getting people on board with change. The second biggest is keeping people on board with change. And it's that ongoing focus. And, we're all so busy and there's so many different things going on. And how do we maintain focus on what's important? How do we keep that practice alive? And I think coaching is the best way that I've seen out of any of the methodologies for maintaining that focus on practice and continuing that growth. Coaching is the bomb.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's hard. It's funny because we always think about goal achievement, goal attainment, and its performance, its production. It's when I get there, and I will have achieved something. We don't usually think about achievement in the way of being a certain way. And so maybe we need a new word. Instead of achievement, it should be like embodiment, right? Because that's what it is. You want to embody a practice, an activity, a behavior, a belief that's ongoing. And you're so right. Coaching is critical to that because self-coaching, though we try and try and try, is really hard to do. So having a sounding board, having a reflecting pool, having someone to help us see our insights is so incredibly helpful.
I just grabbed my ICF competency flashcards.
Yeah.
That we use in our coach certification. And a few years ago, ICF updated the competencies, and this one that embodies a coaching mindset. I was so happy about the way they changed the foundation and the notion that really leaning into this idea of being a coach before you start coaching. So everything else, all the other competencies are what you do, but foundation is about being a coach. And sometimes people have asked me like, well, what's the difference between like ACC, PCC, MCC? And for me, it's been becoming an MCC was about that embodiment and really seeing myself as a coach, and actually less about when I'm in an actual coaching session and more about what's in between and in my own life, making the coach approach part of who I am. And I'm not just like, okay, now I'm going to put on my coaching hat and now I'm going to take off my coaching hat. And Jimmy, I wish I could do it more consistently, but I feel like I have the toughest challenge was as a parent of teenagers. But that's a really tough training regimen. But I think it should be part of every MCC program.
So that's going to be one of the new, not a marker, but a prerequisite. If you're going to be an MCC, you must have been a parent of at least one, and preferably two or more children, because one really isn't the full experience.
They are good trainers.
They're real good trainers. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. I'm just an ACC, but I'm working towards my PCC, and I'm getting close, and I've got to do all the requirements for that. And it occurs to me after talking with and seeing demos and watching webinars and hosting webinars with so many MCCs over this past year, you're so right about the level between ACC to PCC and MCC it's not the practice, it's the embodiment. Just like you said, like embodies the coaching mindset. And as an ACC, without enough hours to be either MCC or PCC, it's just like anything we practice. Like, we can get better. If we're a basketball player, we can get better at shooting. We can get better at free throws through practice and practice and practice and practice. But until we can do it with our eyes closed, then we're not really at that mastery level yet. We're performing at a high level, but we're not masters because it's not a part of us. And so I'm looking forward to one day it not being, I'm constantly checking myself in my session. Am I doing it right? Should I have done something different I'm supposed to be doing now? I just want to be a coach and just kind of Jedi master or Zen master through this thing. Like, I think I should be.
I have good news and bad news. The good news is it does. I mean, I've been coaching for 20 years. I've been formally coaching for 15 years. And I do feel like I step back in pretty smoothly. But one of the things that I think about in this competency of maintains presence, I don't think it means maintains as in you're always present. I don't think it means maintains, it has two meanings in English. One is it stays at 100% is one definition. But the other is you bring your car to the shop before it needs an oil change, before the engine's breaking down, you bring it to the shop, right? And that maintains that piece about setting yourself up to be the coach you mean to be. To me, that's one of the most powerful and beautiful and enriching parts of this work. This inspires for me to share. I'm a little introverted, and despite the work that I do, and I think for a lot of my life, I have longed for a way to connect more meaningfully with people, and I've not really known how to do that. And coaching has helped me do that. And one of the reasons that I really, at a personal level, just feel the power of coaching is it's a process, a framework, a structure that lets me become more of who I really am with other people, who they really are. And that is an incredible gift for us and an incredible responsibility. And it's something that requires tremendous focus, tremendous work. And I think if we want to be worthy of that kind of authentic connection, then doing this work for ourselves, with ourselves, this being work, that's a gift that we can give ourselves and our clients.
Yeah, 100%. Being an introvert certainly has to have its challenges. I wouldn't have guessed you as an introvert. You're like, we're having a great time. And from the moment you can build a good, deep relationship when you want to pretty quickly, I imagine. So I guess I should be honored that we hit it off so well, because I'm a bit of an extrovert.
Also, introversion doesn't, I like people. It's not that I don't like people and I don't like talking, it's that if I'm at a party, I always feel like I'm an outsider. I always have that sense that I'm looking, and those people are connecting and they seem to be enjoying themselves. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So actually, when I have a structure and when I have a role and I know why I'm here, it really helps me connect.
Yeah, well, parties are they're kind of geared for extroverts. They're not really
Yeah.
for introverts. So
Coaching, however.
there are things that extroverts can do to make introverts feel more belong, more welcome, and make it better. We don't always do that, but we try.
Well, you have definitely made it easy for me to connect.
Well, thank you very much. So I'm curious, we've been talking about basically what sounds to me like the soft side of leadership, right? Like coaching and being, we didn't use the word empathetic, but obviously that's a big part of it. How does the work of emotional intelligence translate into the values, like business values? How does it translate into that? Because they don't necessarily sound like they would go together.
So I think the simple question is, how do you as a business create value in the world? And when you think about, okay, we sell widgets, fantastic. So those widgets are somehow making your customers' lives better, or they wouldn't buy them. So some value proposition that you have, and you have some notion of how you fulfill that value proposition. And probably you have some IP and some systems and some products around that. Probably you have, thought about your brand and about your finances. And you probably had some conversations like, well, our culture actually matters. But you might not have really said, what is the culture that's really going to sustain this value proposition? And if we're going to optimize culture, we can't optimize for everything. I remember having a conversation with a senior leader who was saying, well, we're really, we're in a business that's super regulated and controls are essential and we can't make mistakes, but we're trying to become more innovative. I'm like, well, good luck with that, because you're going to try to optimize for zero mistakes and innovation at the same time. I think you can pick one aspect of culture that you're going to really optimize for. And that aspect of culture should be aligned with your way of creating value. And so if you think about your way of creating value, another word for that is strategy. And you say, okay, well, our strategy is X, Y, and Z. Well, what is the culture that's going to sustain and support that particular strategy? And if you haven't designed that kind of internal side of your brand, that internal side of your strategy, you are throwing away huge amounts of money because you are not optimizing the primary vehicle for value creation, which is your own people and relationships, whether that's with shareholders, whether that's with internal and customers, whether that's with external customers. It's the culture is what drives those human interactions. And then we can back up a step from that and say, all right, in order to create that culture, what are the capabilities that we need to have inside our organization? What does it mean to lead in alignment with this culture? What does it mean to lead in a way that shapes and builds this culture? And how do we sustain and grow that culture throughout the enterprise? And everything from the way we advertise for a position to the way we onboard and then develop and promote people, kind of in the HR system side, but even in operational meetings, in the way we communicate, the way we do our internal and external customer communication, all of those are opportunities for culture shaping. And if you're not paying attention to them, you're throwing away money. So if you want to stop throwing away money, then you're going to get your emotional intelligence glasses on and say, okay, I really need to understand the emotional impact of everything that we do here and make sure that we have mapped that against our goals and that we are essentially, like we would do with any business process engineering, we can do kind of the emotional business process engineering. And that's how emotional intelligence translates into strategy and value creation. And we have a ton of published case studies that show that when you really build emotional intelligence in your leadership, it changes the employee relationships, increases engagement, builds better teams, builds better customer relationships, and creates more economic value.
So it sounds like it's an imperative for a business to have emotional intelligence somehow embedded into the culture.
Yeah, only if you want, people to work well together and have, strong customer relationships. Human relationships are very much about culture and community. And yes, people are rational, but no, they're not just rational. And if we want people to work well, we're going to have to stop being irrational and pretending that we're just rational. And, I love it when, it's often, somebody in finance who like starts getting red in the face and saying, can't we just be rational? Like, okay, yes, let's be rational and let's confront the reality. Humans aren't solely rational. And until we confront that reality and say, I'm going to learn to work with and through people, I'm not going to be effective as a leader.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So let's go back all the way to the beginning in our conversation, if it's all right, Josh. I'm curious about the name of the company, 6Seconds. Tell me about that.
So emotions are neurohormones. They're chains of peptides that, a frequent metaphor, actually have a bowl full of little keys on my desk with emotion words on them. And each of these chains of neurohormone form a unique structure, like a key. And then on every living cell in our bodies are receptor sites that are like locks. And these neurohormones are transmitted through our bloodstream. They're produced primarily in our brains, our guts, our hearts, but they're produced all over our bodies. And it's almost like a second communication system. We have nerve cells that carry information and energy. We also have these neuropeptides that carry information and energy. And emotions are part of the fundamental regulatory system of our brains and bodies. They're part of every decision we make, every action we take, every piece of data that's coming in, everything that we assess, everything we know, everything we think is affected by these little emotion chemicals. And these chemicals act very, very quickly. You don't have to be conscious of them. But if you are conscious of them, then you start to get more ability to use them intentionally. These chemicals last in our brains and bodies for up to about 6 seconds. So anytime you're feeling something for longer than 6 seconds, it means that you're recreating the feelings, you're reproducing these chemicals, and you're sending these kind of ripple effects around your body and around your brain. And if you think, as I do, that there's value in all these feelings, there's messages from you for you in every emotion, you have these 6-second windows of opportunity to get that value, to get that insight. And this data, it's incredibly rich data about people, about relationships, about priorities, about how folks see things. And I used to be really uncomfortable with emotions and find emotions confusing and overwhelming. And studying the science of emotion and understanding that there is a logic to emotion, that there is a meaning to emotion, and you can learn to decode it. You have that data available to you for free, constantly, in yourself, in one another. And you walk into any meeting, you walk into any coaching conversation, you walk into any family dinner, and there's a ton of data available to you if you choose to read it. And just like any form of intelligence, part of being intelligent is being more accurate in the way we read that data. And if we're mathematically intelligent, we're accurate with mathematical data. If we're emotionally intelligent, we're accurate with emotional data. And then we effectively use that data to solve problems. And those problems are problems we face all the time in coaching and in management and in life.
So I love science, and it still blows my mind that emotions are chemicals. Like, I can't quite get my head around how an emotion is a neurohormone and it lasts for 6 seconds. So are you saying that if we are feeling sad or mad or happy or whatever it is, we've really only got about 6 seconds to experience that? And if we let it go, we let it go, and it's gone and it's past. So even if we're angry, is that why we count to 10? Because if we let those, if we count to 10, we've surpassed the 6 seconds, and then the anger goes away, and is that what it is?
It is. The problem is, for most of us, it's too easy to count to 10. And so we start counting to 10, and it doesn't really engage our cognitive brains. And so we're like, I'm mad. 1, 2, 3. I'm still mad. How did that person say that? 4, 5. I can't believe this. 6, 7. And we're recreating the anger as we're counting to 10. One of the crucial ideas here is that we also have multiple feelings at any given time. And there's something called the emergent theory of emotions, which actually says we're constantly producing all the emotions all the time. We have all of them, and they're available to us, and we're producing them in different parts of our brains and bodies, and these chemicals are running around, and we reinforce certain ones to help us. So with that notion, we have all of these emotional messages, and saying, I'm mad. My favorite coaching question is, what else are you feeling? And just pausing to kind of look and get a richer picture of what these emotions are telling me before they start transforming and shifting and moving around. So that these chemicals are there, and they are affecting us. And we can choose to pay attention to that, or be irrational and pretend that they're not there.
So true. Yeah, I love that. So we just keep on hitting the reset on that anger button. You're like the 6 seconds, just again, restart. Okay, so we've got to stop doing that. So lesson, stop hitting the restart on your stopwatch. Like, let those 6 seconds run out so you're not angry anymore. But if you're enjoying it, then keep reliving the happiness, right? And it'll keep flooding until you get exhausted and you can't take anymore.
And by the way, anger is not a negative thing.
No, it's just a thing.
It's just a thing. It's actually a really useful emotion. How we process it and what we do with it can be very destructive and very problematic. But in and of itself, it's actually this rich emotional message that's telling us something important about what we're perceiving.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. I was reading on your website and looking at some different things, and I came across one of the blog posts, and it said, the question is, what makes someone stand out as a great coach? And I'm curious, is there one single answer, or what does that look like?
There's not one single answer, but we did do some research on that, and we've surveyed people about being a coach and getting coaching. And one of the things that we found is that great coaches engage with emotions in a meaningful and profound way. And because so many of the challenges that people face are wrapped up in emotion, some coaches have actually been told, don't talk about emotions. Some coaches have been told, well, if a client ever says anything, quote, negative, expresses, quote, negative emotions, you have to shift and talk about what's, quote, positive about that. And I don't recommend that. I think we need to have the skills and courage to engage clients where they are and with what's going on with them. And we don't need toxic positivity. We don't need to tell people everything's fine. We don't need to tell people don't be feeling what you're feeling. What they need from us is somebody who's standing shoulder to shoulder with us, even when it's challenging, especially when it's challenging. And when, as a leader, as a human being, you're facing something that's really confusing, really difficult for you, there's going to be big emotions in it, guaranteed. And probably you already have a lot of knowledge about the situation. You probably already have a lot of information, cognitive information, analytical information. But what you most likely need is somebody who's going to help you understand its emotional side of it and think through and feel through what's going on. And so I think about the ability to stand in the fire with somebody and not flinch back from that, not be scared of that, not be overwhelmed by that. And I told you, I used to be scared of emotions. And so it was a revelation to me. Marilyn Jorgensen, who is also an MCC and the co-creator of the EQ Coach certification with me, we were facilitating one time, and I could see somebody in the group was getting upset. And Marilyn walked right up to that person and put her hand on his shoulder and said, I can see you're having a lot of big feelings right now. Would you like to talk about that? I was just like, wow, that is amazing. Like, first of all, you walked right up to that person, and then you didn't label it as negative or positive. You didn't tell them what they were feeling. You didn't direct them. You just framed it in this neutral, constructive way, and you issued an invitation. And that, I want to be able to do that when I grow up. And that led me into really wanting to learn more about this. And actually, that moment is one of the things that led me to want to co-create this EQ coach certification with her.
Yeah, totally. I love that. That's such a great approach. I could see how that would draw you in. That must have been a big moment. So speaking of big emotions and big moment, I know that you also did some work with retired NFL players. What can you tell me about that, if anything?
That was a fascinating project. We found that, first of all, retired NFL players, compared to just a random population, were more likely to have challenges with their life success factors. They were more likely to have issues with the law. They were more likely to have issues with finances. They're more likely to have issues with health and well-being. And so that's alarming and astounding, because for so many people, you look at an NFL player and you say, like, that's success. But 10 years later, these guys were struggling more than most of us. And the second thing we found is that emotional intelligence was highly correlated with their ability to navigate those challenges. And so for every couple points of higher score on emotional intelligence, they were several points higher on those life outcomes. And that was especially true for people who were kind of near the deeper challenges or near the greater successes. So that the correlation was true throughout, but it was steepest for people who were really struggling and really thriving. And so what that says to me is that when people are in times of deep challenge, they urgently need these skills. And people going from good to great, these are the skills that are going to really get you there.
That's really fascinating. And that last part is really intriguing to me, that the extremes of the scale are the most productive. Is that because they're in a more receptive place, or a place of greater need or want or desire? Like, they're definitely more receptive because of that, maybe, I don't want to say extreme, but that, that outer edge.
Well, I think it's probably true of coaching in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have a client and you say, so what's going on right now? And they're like, oh, things are fine. Okay, well, what do you want to work on? I don't know if I really want to work on anything. All right, cool. Like, on the other hand, when clients are in a place of deeper challenge and they're really struggling with something, or in big opportunity, they're like, I could take this promotion, but I'm not sure about it, and I really need help thinking that through, right? That's when we need more resources. And whether those resources are, regular coaching or emotional intelligence coaching, whether it's self-coaching or coaching from a professional coach, in those times of change and transition, and whether it's in struggle or opportunity, I think that's when we most need to kind of bring forward our resources.
Yeah. A lot of people talk about disruptive leadership. Would
Mm-hmm.
you consider your work with leaders disruptive leadership?
Yeah, I would consider it transformational leadership. And I think we have certainly, I don't know if I should say this on a recording, but we certainly have had people who have gone through 6 Seconds training and then said, you know what, I need to completely change my work. I need to leave this organization. I need to go in a different direction, because part of our process is helping people to connect their own emotions with purpose. And we talk about pursuing noble goals. And for each of us to figure out, what do we really want to be contributing in the world? And how do we do that in the moment to moment of our lives? And that sometimes means radically changing what you're doing with your day-to-day life. But often what it means is doing what you're doing more clearly and carefully and powerfully. So you don't need to change jobs. It could just be the way you change how you're doing your job. But this is part of why emotional intelligence is so powerful in businesses, because when people are actually aligning their own awareness and intention and purpose in the moment to moment, when they're actually showing up as who they want to be and supporting others to show up as who they want to be, first of all, we have a lot more communication, we have a lot more inclusion, we have a lot better problem solving, but there's an energy that's unleashed in that. And that's where we see what we call organizational vitality or engagement soar, because it's like this potential is unlocked, and people are excited to show up and collaborate because it feels good, it feels meaningful, it feels aligned. And so if you're an organizational leader and you're saying, I'm thinking about hiring 6 Seconds, but I really want to maintain this negative, toxic culture in my organization, you're going to be pretty disappointed.
I would imagine so.
I will say we've worked with some very difficult organizational cultures. And there are some organizational cultures where it's maybe unreasonable to say we're going to work on emotional intelligence, because if your organization is really deeply committed to kind of a transactional, rule-based, mechanistic view of humans, and you're not ready to change that. I remember working with the US Marines, and at one point this very senior officer kind of pushed back and it's like, well, son, you don't understand how we do things here. And this was a course about increasing your readiness for change. And I wish I'd had the wherewithal. I didn't. I wish I'd had the wherewithal to say, yes, that's exactly why they hired me. But, if you don't want to change and you don't want to unleash the capability of people and you want to stay in that transactional mode, this is going to be a real struggle. But we have worked with some organizations that have said, we really need to shift. And it's, the 21st century, and we actually need we need human beings, not, automatons. Like, we've got great robots now. We don't need people to be robots. We need people to be people. And that's emotional intelligence and coaching are going to be fabulous tools for shaping culture in that way.
Yeah, totally. What do they say? We need human beings, not human doings.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting close to the end of our time here. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling, like has never been able to identify emotions, or maybe is really negative a lot? Like, what advice might you give?
So I'd say the first step is to let go of that framework of negative and positive. Just think about emotions are data, they're messages from you to you. There's something going on, and they're there all the time. And so sometimes people say, well, I'm not feeling anything. Okay, you are. You just haven't learned how to tune into that. And sometimes emotions shout, but a lot of times they whisper. And so kind of slowing down, making more space, things like journaling, using metaphors. We sell a lot of different emotion cards, or I have on my desk like a little collection of things we call emoticons, little objects that we use as metaphors to help people kind of think a little bit laterally. Sometimes you might not know what the feeling is called, but maybe you can identify it in terms of color or a shape or a sound. Maybe you can identify what it feels like physically. My jaw is clenched. Okay, awesome. That's a clue to something. My mind is going, 1,000 miles an hour. Fantastic. That's a clue to something. So we don't need to jump right into what we call emotional literacy and actually naming the feelings with feeling words. We can start with a more metaphorical space. And I find a lot of organizations, I'm just going back to the Marine Corps, they talk about emotions all the time. They just don't use emotion words. They say oorah and head in the game and esprit, right? That's all emotion. They've encoded it in some different terms. And we all do that in every organization. We have different ways of talking about our human experience. And so just starting with that curiosity of saying, there's emotion here. I wonder what it is. And one of the things that in our coach certification, we talk about the skill of becoming an emotion detective and just noticing these small clues in ourselves and in one another, and getting curious about that and curious about it from this neutral place. There's no should. This is not negative or positive. It's just you're perceiving something, and so you're feeling something. And I wonder what that's telling me. And, the kind of classic, that's interesting. That mindset, that's an interesting mindset. That mindset of being a scientist or a detective and saying, there is something going on, because if you are conscious, you are experiencing emotions. Like, that's what we know about the neurobiology. These chemicals are there. And just step back and saying, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on here. just like Marilyn did with that person, like, oh, it seems like you're experiencing some big feelings. Would you like to talk about it? That is something we can do with ourselves. And this is a great opportunity to get a coach.
I agree, totally. So one last question. I'm curious, with all the things that we've talked about and with the impact that coaching has in the world currently, what are you hoping to see in the future of coaching?
Well, I can tell you, and a less grand answer would be, some of the most interesting projects that I've been working on have been organizations saying, we're going to embed coaching as part of our culture strategy. And we want leadership and coaching to be more synonymous here. And so we've had some fantastic organizations that we've worked with around growing that coaching culture and leader as coach culture, and getting kind of everyone some basic awareness of coaching as a way of managing and leading. And then getting a lot of people in managerial roles to have more coach skills so that they learn how to engage and support people more effectively. And then building some internal coaches who are actually going all the way to PCC level so that they can become mentors and supporters of coaching culture within the organization. And I've seen that organizations that are doing this, it's a very powerful way to do culture shaping. And so that's a piece that I'm particularly excited about in the years to come.
Well, that's pretty exciting. I would love to see more coaching as a formal piece of not necessarily onboarding, but a part of the training and development, the leadership development, talent management that goes on at organizations to make it more of a part. I've got 30 years of training and development under my belt, and coaching does not come up very often in the language. It's all training for skills. And yes, there's emotional intelligence for sure, all that, but very little getting a coach involved on a regular basis. And I think, yeah, I totally agree with that. That would be fantastic.
And being a coach, we're partners with Antioch University, and in our EQ coach certification is accredited for almost a third of your MBA. One of the pieces that we're also working on is in their corporate education, continuing education work, embedding more coaching skills for managers. So helping managers use coaching skills to support employee well-being, to support performance management, to support team development. And these coaching skills can be embedded in learning programs that also, by the way, support your employees to get their MBAs or other master's degrees later, or their undergraduate degrees if needed. So if that's something anyone's interested in, I'd be glad to talk to you about it.
Awesome. And speaking of that, Josh, this has been a great conversation, but I want people to be able to find you. Of course, we'll put all sorts of stuff in the speaker notes, but in case nobody checks those, tell us how people can find you.
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So that's a great place to connect with me. And I'm an open networker on LinkedIn. So I have lots and lots of connections there and happy to connect with people. Joshua Freedman on LinkedIn. And then 6Seconds is also active on LinkedIn and all the other social media outlets. You can go to 6seconds.org. It's actually the number 6 and the word seconds.org. Although if you just type in Google 6Seconds, however you spell it, we're going to show up there. And we have a contact page, and there's tons of articles and case studies and resources there. There's a lot of fantastic free tools that you can use in your coaching and for your self-coaching.
That is fantastic. Josh, this has been a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you for taking so much time out of your day to be with us today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure and good to connect across country.
Across the country, from Santa Cruz to South Florida.
Amazing. From sea to shining sea.
Exactly. Josh, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today. And I look forward to, seeing you in January. You're going to do one of our master classes. So, hey, everybody in South Florida and all across the world, watch out. Josh is coming back to join us. So we appreciate him very much.
Thank you.
What a great conversation. It's always so refreshing to learn new things and gain new insights. And that's what coaching can do for you. If you've been stuck in the same place, doing the same things, not getting the traction you're seeking, or you just want a shortcut to get there sooner, I am ready to guide and support you and help you find the keys to become the leader you've always wanted to be. Head to my website at jimmyglenos.com. I look forward to working with you real soon. Until then, I'm Jimmy Glenos, the Life and Leadership Locksmith, helping you unlock the shortcut. See you next time, everybody.